Hey, what's going on, family and friends? The Linqto hearing today was jam-packed. So packed that Judge Alfredo Pérez is now stretching the hearing out to tomorrow. So it's turned into a 2-day hearing, so now it looks like I'm crashing in Houston for the night. Regardless, day one of the Linqto bankruptcy proceedings focused primarily on setting the foundation for the case. The bankruptcy case has been going on for almost 8 months now, but seeing everyone in the courtroom was a little different. We heard testimony from Linqto's chief restructuring officer, Jeff Stein, outlining how the company arrived at its current position and what the company's proposed plan looks like moving forward. A recurring theme that was brought up often was Linqto's original mission, expanding access to private pre-IPO investments, which was well-intentioned, but the company's internal controls, compliance framework, and governance didn't scale at the same pace as its growth. As the platform expanded, structural weaknesses became more pronounced, eventually creating regulatory, legal, and financial strain, according to Jeff Steins, Jeremy Rosenthal, a recently appointed board member, and the legal counsel representing the debtors. Much of the discussion was centered on how customer interests were structured. The court examined the distinction between economic exposure versus direct ownership, so SPVs versus the underlying equity, alongside concerns that a meaningful number of customers may not have met the accreditation requirements. Asset concentration was also highlighted, particularly linked to significant exposure into Ripple-related investments, which added both complexity and risk, confirming Linqto customers, about 10,000 out of 14,000 investors, have exposure into Ripple Labs, totaling about 69% of Linqto's total customer base. And remember that Linqto owns somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 4% of Ripple's total issued shares. That's a mixed bag of common and preferred stock, by the way. Another major focus was the issue of potential rescission claims tied into the disclosures, customer eligibility, and prior transactions. These risks were presented as a key driver behind the company's insolvency and the need for a court-supervised restructuring rather than a simple wind-down. Attention then shifted to proposed restructuring frameworks, including the creation of new entities under Series LLC frameworks and mechanisms intended to preserve customer economic value while addressing regulatory and liquidity constraints. Throughout this portion, the court appeared to be focused less on assigning blame and more on whether the proposed structure is workable, fair, and capable of reducing further litigation. One detail that stood out to me during these discussions was the treatment of fees under the proposed plan. While a 5% fee was referenced in the plan, it became clear that this number isn't firmly capped. Rather than a hard ceiling, it should be viewed as an estimate, meaning that these total fees could ultimately exceed the debtor's projected levels depending on how this restructuring unfolds. This raises concerns and questions around costs and oversight for us stakeholders trying to assess the eventual net outcomes of this situation. This became apparent when Linqto shareholder Gavin Solomon took the stand and cross-examined Mr. Stein on a pro se basis. He was also able to get Mr. Steins to reiterate how us Linqto shareholders are the ones left holding the bag after all these creditors get paid, like Nikkl's $25 million creditor claim submitted by Jesus Anchata, the former co-founder of Nikkl, who's now the chief administrative officer at Linqto. Conflict of interest much? Maybe, but I'm not an attorney. Overall, day one was about framing issues rather than solving them. This hearing laid the groundwork for evaluating feasibility, transparency, and long-term implications of the proposed plan, with several key questions, particularly around costs, governance, and customer treatment. This leaves the door wide open for further examination tomorrow. So I'll circle back tomorrow with further updates. We got this, my Linqto family. Thanks for tuning in. Love you mucho.